Greetings, Star Citizens, and welcome to another beautiful day in the verse and another episode of my Let's Talk series. So, the first episode of this series got a bit of negativity because I was a little bit negative towards CIG and towards the demo. I didn't intend to be negative. I wasn't intending to say anything was bad. And I actually said that it was a good demo. It was a great demo. I just personally would have liked to seen a bit of different things. Now, that's not to say they should have made those changes. I was just giving my insight on what I would have liked to see. Now, for this episode, I thought I'd talk about the Polaris. I was going to talk about the Polaris in last week, but I knew with it being a concept ship, there was going to be two Q&As as tradition. It's tradition, we get two Q&As. We get a Q&A part 1 and then we get a Q&A part 2 for pretty much every single ship that comes out, just to give us a bit more insight on it and answer a few questions. I personally think we should get these before it goes on sale, because a lot of these Q&As will open up a lot of essentially deal breakers for people. People up until the Q&As have to speculate a lot of things, and it's only when they get both Q&As can they actually know for certain about certain things, because they get it confirmed, because the stat store page isn't always accurate and it isn't always filled out. A lot of times for a concept ship it'll just be to be decided, and you won't actually have any information, and you're relying on what the devs tell you, and they don't tell you much until the Q&As, because that's the point where they actually sit down and answer some questions. So for this episode, I'm going to talk about the Polaris, my thoughts on the Polaris, and perhaps give you a little bit more insight if you're planning on buying a Polaris. So the Polaris is a corvette ship, and you might be wondering, what is a corvette ship? And essentially, a corvette is the light fighter, the light agile fighter of a capital ship. Now, you might be thinking, hang on a second, it's definitely not a light fighter. The M50 and the Sabre is a light fighter. This definitely isn't a light fighter. And you are right, it isn't as light or it isn't as agile as an M50, by no means. But when we talk capital ships, and we're talking big capital ships, this is the light fighter for that sort of category of ships, that scale of ships. It is going to most likely be on the front line of a capital ship fleet. So if you've got, say, an Idris or a Javelin, you're probably going to have a Polaris there just for extra damage and just extra numbers, because a Javelin is a big ship. It is a powerful ship, but it is not really going to be able to defend itself against a lot of fighters. The Corvette has capability of essentially chasing down smaller fighters like Sabres. It's got the chance of chasing down bombers like Retaliators, and it's got the ability to kill them and chase them down, whereas the Javelin and the Idris and such are very much dependent on defending themselves with turrets. They can't go and chase something. So if something's doing hit and run tactics on it, there's not really much they can do to it other than just do a bit of damage to it every time it shows its face. But if that Retaliator or that Sabre or whatever it is that's attacking it is smart, it's going to sort of run in, do a bit of damage, wait until its shields are low, and then it's going to hide from the turrets, and then you can't do anything. So the Polaris is going to be ideal for chasing those down. Now, should you get a Polaris as a solo pilot? I would strongly advise against that. If you are planning to play this game alone, I would advise against it. The developers have also advised against it somewhere in the Q&A, because that was one of the questions, is how viable is it on your own? And the developer strongly advised against it. It is pretty much designed for use with players, and they pretty much specified that. They sort of negated the NPCs as well. They said that it is very specified for player interaction. So if you don't have a few friends, at least a few friends to go with you on a Polaris, I wouldn't get it. And even if you had enough friends to fill a Polaris, I still wouldn't get it unless you know someone that's going to get or has got an Idris or a Javelin or a ship on that scale, because a Polaris on its own is going to be a very niche ship. It's not really going to have much of a role. It's essentially designed to be with bigger ships. It's not designed to do anything on its own. And that's another thing that was brought to light in this Q&A, and that is modularity. Modularity is something I personally like the idea of. I like the idea of getting a ship that you might not perfectly like and tweaking it and adjusting it and changing it into a different ship. And a lot of people were hoping that the Polaris would also have modularity. So the big hangar bay that takes up about half of the ship cannot be changed for anything else. You cannot change that to a cargo bay. It is fixed into being a hangar bay. Now, how many ships can you fit in that hangar bay? Well, you could squeeze in, and I mean literally squeeze in by the millimeter, a Aegis Warden, Vanguard Warden. And when I say squeeze, I do mean literally squeeze it in there, as in, I'm not sure if the game will allow it because it's going to be such a tight fit, but that just gives you an idea of sort of how big the hangar bay is and what you could potentially fit in there. You could also fit in 3, possibly 4, but it would be a squeeze, Gladius ships, and I believe you could fit 6 M50s. So I'm not going to go through the list of every ship you can fit in there. It is somewhere lurking around Reddit, the whole list, but you know, I just want to give you that. So 6 M50s, that just gives you sort of a bit of a visual idea of what you could potentially fit in there. So quite a lot of the ships, most of the fighting ships, or pretty much all of the fighting ships except the very big fighters, could fit in the back of a Polaris with no problems. So what is the Polaris's role other than just being a fighter? You know, if you don't want to just fight, what can you do? Now, the very, very, very primary role of the Polaris is to fight. That is its one main focus, and the devs have specified that it's not modular to remove that fighting role. So another thing that cannot be changed is the torpedo bay down in the bottom of the ship. I'm just presuming the bottom of the ship. So the Polaris can carry 24 torpedoes stored, and it can have 4 of them armed. Now that cannot be swapped out for cargo, it cannot be swapped out for anything else. It's fixed with torpedoes, so if you don't want to be a fighting ship, you're wasting a lot of damage potential. And if you don't want a fighting ship, then I would advise against it. You know, if you're looking at this and you just want the hangar, then I would probably wait for something like the Endeavour to come back on sale, or just wait for the game to come out and work towards an Endeavour instead of this, because this primary role is fighting. It's not really going to be that good for anything else. It's definitely not going to be an exploration ship, though you probably could, with a little bit of creativity, you could make it into a bit of a exploration ship. But it's definitely not designed to be an exploration ship. So another question that went around the Q&A is, what types of ships would the Polaris be good at fighting against? And interestingly, they said that the Polaris is ideal for taking on small and medium-sized capital ships. So it is definitely designed to take out more than its payload, more than its size, because if we think small, medium capital ships, I would class the Idris as a small to medium-sized capital ship. When you look at sort of the ship scales and some of the Vandal ships, especially the Bengal, then the Idris is small in respect to those. So the fact that it's designed to take out small and medium-sized ships is very interesting, though it's not really surprising, because it does have 24 torpedoes and 4 of them armed. So it's got 28 torpedoes total, which is absolutely insane. I'm assuming they're size 9 torpedoes, though I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that, but I believe they're size 9. No, they're actually size 10. Size 10 torpedoes. So it's got 28 torpedoes that are slightly bigger than the Retaliator's torpedoes. So going back to what I said earlier on into this video about the modularity, this is one thing that for me put me off getting the ship. I was tempted to get the ship when we was hearing sort of rumors about it before we saw it and such, and the fact that it isn't modular kind of puts me off, because I was hoping that there would be an ability to change the hangar bay into a cargo bay, and that has been pretty much denied. It's been confirmed it is not going to be modular. The hangar bay and the torpedo bay are especially not modular. However, some other bits may be modular, such as utility modularity, but the two big things, the torpedo bay and the hangar bay, cannot be changed for cargo bays. Now, they did say, and they have said this in the past about other ships such as the Starfarer, that you can carry loose cargo. And what loose cargo is essentially, with that hangar bay, you could fit an awful lot of cargo in there, but it would not be tied down to the ship. It would not be anchored down to the ship, because it wouldn't have the cargo pads that you find on the floor. So, although you could theoretically fill it to every inch of it with cargo, it would all be loose cargo, and then if you was to open the door in space or whatever, or if you was to crash or take a big impact or land a bit hard, it would all fly around, it would slide around, it would smash into stuff, and it would probably cause a lot of damage on the interior of the ship. So they do say that you can do that, you can carry loose cargo, but it is highly advised not to, because the chances are you're going to do more damage than what it's worth. You're not going to earn the amount of damage that you're going to do to the interior of the ship, or the amount of damage that you could potentially do to the interior of your ship. Obviously, if you're a perfect 100% safe pilot, no claims at all, then you could probably go ahead with that risk, fill it up with loose cargo and make an absolute fortune. But me personally, I like to stick to the rules. I like to stick to being safe, and I just think with loose cargo there'll be a lot of game limitations as well. I'm not saying they won't be able to sort of fulfill it, but with that many physical objects, I can see there being a lot of glitches, a lot of bugs, a lot of things to iron out, and I personally am not going to go down that route. So I'm not interested in the Polaris in the slightest. It's not a ship for me. It's not a role that I want to fill. I'm not that into big combat. I mean, in the future that might change depending how much this channel grows. If this channel gets big enough to a point where I feel I want to start an organization for the channel, then I might change my mind and I might be looking at a Polaris. But if I'm looking at capital ships, I'd personally rather have a Javelin or an Idris. I'd rather have one of the big boys, one of the big sort of just things that just everybody's going to gravitate to. It's the reason I like my Starfarer, because at the moment, if you fly one out in the verse, everyone just gravitates to it, and it's like it's just a big magnet flying through space, and you just pick up every ship you fly past because they're all trying to check you out. But on the other side of modularity, I personally don't like the look of the ship, and I know this is going to get me a lot of hate like I did in the first Let's Talk, but I personally don't like the look of the Polaris. I know a lot of people do. A lot of people love the look of it. They think it's a beautiful ship, but I just don't like it. It's not my style of ship. It's not my aesthetics. I just don't really like the wedge style to it. And it reminds me a lot of Elite Dangerous. So I think a lot of people who are into Elite Dangerous ships will probably love this ship, because it looks like it's taken from Elite Dangerous. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Polaris, and I hope this gives you a bit more insight if you are planning on getting one, or if you just want to know a little bit more about the ship and you've not read the Q&As or you've not looked into it that much. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight and helps you out in the future. Other than that, I will see you guys in the next video. Laters, taters.
Quantum drive is now